Good morning. How are you? Good to see you. I'm so grateful for you. Great sacred cookies. I'm sending an agent out to capture all that aren't eaten. No matter who you are, no matter where you are on your spiritual journey, you are welcome here. We were driving home from working out the other day. We live in a neighborhood where there are lots of intersections. Some are four-way stops, some are all stops. I've never figured out the difference between them. Some are stops only in one direction. I mean, cross street, north, south, east, west. And I have learned, and I pray to stay conscious of not taking for granted that just because cross-coming traffic has a stop sign, that the people will honor that. Not a month ago, I saw a car zip through the intersection of Auden and Rice Boulevard, going 40 miles an hour, didn't stop. At the intersection where there are a lot of kids, there's a community center, the library, the Little League Park. It was amazing that somebody was not hurt. But I've seen this numerous times on my drive home from church. And at any rate, we were driving home from working out improves your SQ, your superiority quotient. And I could see a car approaching from the left. I had the right of way, but something in me said, just go slow. And this woman, I don't mean to be sexist, zipped through the intersection, did not slow down, cell phoned ahead. She noticed what she had done, and with the other hand said, my bad, and just kept going.
Oh my God, light turns green.
My life companion immediately said, time for the Mother Teresa prayer. What's that? I said, now I know Mother Teresa. She's got a write-up in this month's Sojourners. I know a lot of Mother Teresa prayers that are great, but I had no idea what she had in mind. And she said, break open my heart, O Lord, and let the whole world fall in. That was not what I was about to say. Sometimes we have to hear something we may have heard multiple times across our lifetime for us to really hear it, maybe even for the first time. We need whatever it takes to get us out of our easily jaded ways of being so that we can recapture what the Buddhists refer to as beginner's mind, what Jesus referred to as having the mind of a child, and what Paul referred to as having the mind of Christ. May God break my heart so completely that the whole world falls in. May God break our hearts so completely that the whole world falls in. This is a heartbreaking time in our country and in our world. And the natural reaction, as I was about to do in that intersection, is shut down, close up, to withdraw. Many years ago, long before I started teaching Ordinary Life, I was influenced by the same woman who was in the car with me that day to go take the training in Vipassana meditation. I had seen what it had done in her life, a really powerful response. And though almost every fiber in my being resisted going to it, I did. We heard about it from a good friend of ours who had gone, and he described what it was like to be there, and Sherry's immediate response was, I want to do that, and 2 weeks later she was gone, and my response was, there ain't no way in hell I'm going to do that. The meditation training, and by the way, this is the largest meditation movement in the world. It's, this particular form is simply called a 10-day. The retreat actually lasts for 12 days, but it consists of a 10-day period of time in which the participants take the first 5 vows of a Buddhist monk or nun, plus 1. And the vows are not to kill, not to steal, not to lie, no sexual misconduct, and no use of intoxicants or stimulants. Now, the vow not to kill, not to harm any sentient being. By the way, these are not exactly in the order that you will find in the Eightfold Path, although the Eightfold Path embraces them. Not to kill, the practical implication of this for this retreat is that all the food is vegetarian. You get 1 meal a day. Unless you're a newbie, and then in the evening you get a cup of hot tea and a piece of fruit. The vow not to steal means that the retreat is free. You can't buy it. No money exchanges hands. If you want to make a contribution, you can, but no pressure is put on you to do that. The vow to speak no lies is why the retreat is silent. You yourself know how easy it is to put a spin on something the minute you open your mouth. I don't think that's projection. The vow about no sexual misconduct, its practical application means that during the retreat, the men and women are strictly sexually segregated at meal times and in the meditation hall. And you are instructed that when the retreat begins on the first night, you are not to look in the face of another person for the next 10 days. The vow about intoxicants and stimulants is pretty clear. It's easy to do without the booze, but no coffee, no caffeine in any form for 10 days. And then there's the 6th vow, and that's not to leave. To stick it out. At the end of every day, a video lecture is played featuring the founder of this particular school of Vipassana meditation. The word Vipassana is a Pali word that simply means to see what is. So you can see the influences of this movement in my own development of what I think spirituality is all about. By the way, you sit in meditation for a total of 16 and a half hours a day. The first set begins very early in the morning, and it lasts for 2 hours. On the second day, you're told, beginning tomorrow, we will have 3 sittings of strong determination, meaning that during those 3 one-hour sittings, you vow not to move, except for breathing. So if you itch, S.N. Gwinka from Burma has a very heavy accent, and he begins each evening's lecture with the same phrase. Day 1 is over. You have 9 more days to work. Day 2 is over. Folks, this is like climbing the longest mountain you've ever. Day 1, I've got 9 more of these to do. When our friend Don Williamson was telling us about it, he said that during the day you will hear recorded instructions from Gwinka. And one of the things that they're teaching you in Vipassana meditation is to pay attention to your breathing and to the physical sensation of breathing. So Gwinka will say in his recorded lecture, observe your respiration. And Don said that it was like day 7 before he realized that he was not saying, observe your desperation. Indeed. At any rate, at the end of each day, there is a prayer, or a blessing, if you will, that is offered. May I and all people everywhere be filled with loving kindness and compassion. May I and all people everywhere be well. May I and all people everywhere be peaceful and at ease. May I and all people everywhere be happy. And you know those 5 vows and that blessing, if we all did that on a regular basis, that'd help the whole world. And then there's another verse added to this blessing that goes, may I and all people everywhere also have the patience, the courage, the understanding, and the determination to meet and overcome the inevitable difficulties, problems, and failures that come to us in life. Now, this talk is not about the 10-day, but I wanted to use this as an introduction to get into reminding you of what's called the perennial tradition. These teachings that are in the Pali tradition have their roots in a Hindu practice that goes back thousands of years. This perennial or wisdom tradition, as it is called by some, it has this teaching about embracing everyone and everything. And it goes back, the roots are 2500 BC. It goes back to that period of mysticism, the Abrahamic tradition, the Hindu tradition, the Buddhist tradition, the Upanishad tradition in India, the Jewish prophetic wisdom tradition. Jesus certainly is in that tradition. In every century of recorded history, you find this perennial or wisdom tradition, some evidence of it. We're falling off in the 9th century, but certainly comes back with fierceness in the 10th, 11th, 12th, 13th, 14th, 15th, 16th century, and then the 17th century, it goes away. Just to be coming back in our lifetime. The 17th century was the age of enlightenment. I think it's really interesting that the age of enlightenment introduced us to so much darkness. When I got back from the 10-day, my primary constant emotion was just one of overwhelming gratitude. And I had a teacher at that time who had become Buddhist, and we talked a lot about what my experience was. I told him about that blessing that I had learned, and he said, just as is true with all spiritual teachings that originate from way back, the original teaching has been not corrupted, but amplified on and tried to be clarified. And he said that the original of that blessing was one that Buddha offered his monks when they went out on their work. By the way, I'm calling this talk today kind of a move away from the 17th century. I'm calling it From Reason to Wonder. So the original saying of Buddha, according to my teacher, was, "May I be free of enmity and danger." Now, originally, you might think that mantra was meant to offer protection to the monks as they went out about on their solitary ways. And we would all like that, right? May I be protected from any endangerment that comes to me, from any enemies that are out there. By the way, Buddhists don't have enemies. They have adversaries. There's a difference in how they conceptualize that, but that's a whole other thing. What my teacher said is what this teaching means is, may I not endanger my clarity of vision by allowing my mind to be confused by anger. In Buddhism, anger is the chief corrosive. May my mind stay clear enough for me to make sound judgments about what to do. When we're frightened, when somebody cuts across the intersection, anger comes up. I mean, it's fear, but fear is easier to deal with if you can transform it into anger. Okay? And then we get captured usually by some sort of righteousness. Why didn't that woman learn how to drive or pay attention? Instead of, thank God, I'm still here. And if we do get captured by anger, then we lose our way. And these are frightening times. And it's easy to get lost. It's easy to become judgmental. I want to read you the way David Brooks began one of his columns this week. We're living in an age of anxiety. The country is being transformed by complex forces such as changing demographics and technological disruption. Many people live within a bewildering freedom, isn't that an interesting phrase? Without institutions to trust, unattached to compelling religions and sources of meaning, uncertain about their own lives. Anxiety is not so much a fear of a specific thing, but a fear of everything, a dread about the future, and people will do anything to escape. Though this teaching is explicit in Buddhism, as I've implied or said, this teaching is explicit in every living wisdom tradition from 2500 BC up until now. The way the Buddhists say it is, may all beings be at ease, omitting none. Let none, through anger or ill will, wish harm upon another. Just as a mother would give her life to support her one and only child, so should we boundlessly open our hearts. If you're familiar with Thich Nhat Hanh or any of his teaching, you know that he is very big on looking at everyone in your life as your mother. Because at some point that person was. So, not my notes. So. May God break our hearts so completely that the whole world falls in, omitting none. Now, all of this business about being lost and cut off from, in contrast to the unity spoken of in all wisdom tradition, that's what came to my mind when I started looking at the teaching from the Gospel of Thomas we are up to for today, and most of you know it in some form. This is the way it appears in Thomas. The divine realm, the kingdom of God, can be compared to a shepherd who had 100 sheep. One of the finest went astray, so he left the 99 and went out searching for it until he found it. Troubled, he said, I long for you more than the 99. Now, I mentioned to you in the preview that went out about this talk that sometimes I use a metaphor about the teachings of Jesus, and the metaphor is this. Jesus wrote music. And various musicians performed it. And they performed it according to the instrument that they had and the audience that they were performing to. That makes sense? So you have 3 versions of this particular teaching in the Christian teachings, and they're all different. Now, we don't know much about who made up the Thomas community. They were Jewish in the prophetic wisdom tradition who had withdrawn from the Christian movement as it was developing, had withdrawn from the empire. They collected these wisdom teachings of Jesus. They didn't build a narrative story about him. But this parable is found in Luke and in Matthew. So I'll just read it to you in them, and you can see how Luke's differs. Jesus told them a parable. Suppose one of you owns 100 sheep, and one of them strays off. You would leave the 99 behind in the wilderness and go in the search for the one that was lost, wouldn't you? And when you find it, you would lift it up on your shoulders, happy, wouldn't you? Once you get home, you would invite your friends and neighbors over and say to them, celebrate with me because I have found my lost sheep. So Thomas, the one you see on the screen, emphasizes unity and completion. Luke emphasizes God's care and compassion. And you might know or remember that Luke puts 2 additional parables after this. There's the one of the woman who had 10 coins, lost one, found one, had a party. There's the one about a man who had 2 sons, lost one, found one, had a party. One of my Jewish friends says that, whether we lose or win, the next thing we say is, let's eat. So now I want to read to you how Matthew uses this. If someone has 100 sheep and one of them wanders off, won't that person leave the 99 in the hills and go look for the one that wandered off? And if he should find it, you can bet he'll rejoice over it more than over the 99 that didn't wander off. So Matthew uses this parable to fuss at the religious leaders for not attending to their proper business. All the biblical scholars that I respect say, however, that there's another version of this parable that we don't have. And that Matthew and Luke base theirs on that, and probably so does Thomas, since a lot in Thomas appears earlier than even what you have in some of Mark. And Robert Funk says that he guesses that the original of this parable looks something like this. A man has 100 sheep, and one of them went astray, and he leaves the 99 on the mountain and goes out to seek the one until it is found. Now, I think it's interesting, fascinating, fun for me to sort through all these books and references and read all these men and women who have devoted their lives to finding out the meaning of these texts. What did Jesus mean? What did he say? But the real point of the parables, or Jesus' teaching, then and now, is not what they meant. The real point is not what they mean. The real point is the meaning they create. Now that is so important, I want to say it again. The real point of the teachings of Jesus is not what they meant, but the meaning they create for us. Now Jesus' main message was about what he called the rule of God. And whatever else that realm of reality was, it was not, as it has become for most people who speak of it, the kingdom of God or the kingdom of heaven, which is out there in the future, or you're really up there somewhere, gated community. The realm of God, the power of God, the presence of God that Jesus talked about was in contrast to everything that the Roman Empire stood for. That's why Jesus' appeal was not to people in power, not to people who made the rules, but to the people who were poor and powerless. Now, even if you did not go to church as a child, you know the image of God as shepherd. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down beside still water. You know, all that. And undoubtedly, you have seen some painting like this. I did a search of images of Jesus as shepherd and found thousands. Always a white guy. Not Mediterranean dark skin. Jesus is referred to as a lamb, even in Christian liturgy, drawn from the Exodus story about the sacrificial lamb, the scapegoat, and the lamb that was slain for the sins of the people. So early in Jewish history, the culture was largely nomadic. They moved from place to place, tribal mentality. Sheep and herding were central to their existence. By the time of Jesus, that culture had gone away. And in place of it had come an agricultural culture. So that shepherding and shepherds had been marginalized to the edge of society. And to be a shepherd was to be someone who was unclean. If you wanted to adhere to the purity laws in Judaism, you could not be a shepherd. And we so romanticize the notion of shepherds and sheep that we can easily miss the offensive nature of this parable. Just as in so many parables, Jesus makes the hero, the central guy, somebody you wouldn't touch. And to make it worse, in Matthew's version, the shepherd is identified with church leaders who are taught by it to go after those who had strayed from the teachings of the church. Luke addresses this parable to the Pharisees who object to Jesus for eating with unclean people. He enjoyed table fellowship with everybody. Either way, it's an offensive parable. I want to read you a quote from one of the commentaries I have on these writings. Quote, a man, patriarchal society, a man should not teach his son to be an ass driver or a camel driver or a barber or a sailor or a herdsman or a shopkeeper, for their craft is the craft of robbers. I know some shopkeepers like that. So you first hear this parable, and you got to decide, what kind of shepherd is this? Is this the good shepherd from the Hebrew tradition, or is this the bad shepherd that we have come to know in our culture right now? And furthermore, with whom do I identify? Do I identify with the shepherd, with the sheep, or with the 99? And isn't this a pretty stupid shepherd? He leaves 99 very good, valuable sheep to go after one straggly thing that he might not even find. And when he comes back, the 99 may be gone. I'm going to identify with that. Any of that. Well, here's where I've come out at the moment. At almost every turn in his teaching, Jesus was challenging those who made the rules, those who ran the show. And he kept offering a different way of seeing the world and those who live on it. And he was saying, you are lost. He clearly says in other places in his teaching, it's the marginalized who seek out and find and save the well-off and the respected. That is to say, we have to be open to looking in the places and people where we least expect it to find our salvation. I think the great gift of truly spiritual people is their ability to have this kind of faith, to have this kind of seeing. I think we can take the tragedies of our time as opportunities for a faithful reframing of the message of Jesus. You'll find this hard to believe, But some time ago, I said something in here that someone took to be a bit radical. By the way, the word radical is a good word. It simply means to get at the root of things, right? The word radical and radish have the same origin, to get at the root of. And at any rate, this person said, you know, I agree with what you said, but Bill, you've got to be reasonable. When I got involved in the civil rights movement in Tennessee back in the days, my horrified parents would say, now William, that's what they call me, William, you know, you're right, but be reasonable, you got to go slow. Just go slow. There was a man whose name is Martin Niemöller. He was a German pastor in the Confession Church, Covenant Church in Germany. And when Hitler came to power, he was very much in favor of Hitler because Hitler spoke to those German people who were so demoralized, so hopeless, so hurt, so without identity. And Hitler spoke to that hurt, and Niemöller saw that it was a good thing to give the German people a reason to see a future. But as Hitler went on, and the Nazis went on in their movement, Niemöller took a stand against Hitler, and for that he was arrested and put in a concentration camp, where he stayed until the Allies liberated that camp later. And after, he wrote a poem, Martin Niemöller did. He became, by the way, the chief spokesman for German reconciliation after the war. And this poem was widely circulated at the time that it came out. When the Nazis came for the communists, I remained silent. I was not a communist. When they locked up the Social Democrats, I remained silent. I was not a Social Democrat. When they came for the trade unionists, I did not speak out. I was not a trade unionist. When they came for me, there was no one left to speak out. Now, interestingly enough, when that poem first came out, they didn't print the first verse of it when they came to the communists. And the reason it was not printed was because this country was in the grips of McCarthyism. Only later did it come out. We need to be reasonable. I agree with that. But I don't believe we have been given intellects and expected not to use them. If, however, we stay in the arena of reason alone, we will never fall into the wonder and amazement, never fall into the hands of God. Again, rather than just stopping at what a teaching of Jesus means, let's move into the space where the teaching can create meaning for us. There's no way a person who's open and honest and reasonable can read the entire Jesus story and come away with anything other than the conviction that God's desire is that all people on this planet, especially the poor and the disadvantaged, the outcast of societies, experience love and compassion, generosity, kindness, and justice. Do we really think that God is interested in as something as superficial as this? Does the God of Jesus truly love only a small part of the population who happen to believe a certain set of things about Jesus? There's no debate among the biblical scholars that this is the teaching of Jesus. The difficulty comes in trying to figure out what it means, and can we see it, hear it in such a way that would lead us from being oh so reasonable into the land of radical wonder about both sacred mystery and about who we are in relationship to that mystery, and about how then we are to live our lives. My growing faith is that the goal of our religious and spiritual practices is not to make us good. It's certainly not to make God love us or treat us special. It's not so that we will be saved. Not about fixing it so we'll go to heaven when we die. Because when religion is used for any of these purposes, it's a false religion. It becomes a dangerous one. If we step into the realm of radical wonder, how can we help but be good? Though none of us deserves it or is good enough for it, there's nothing we can do to receive any more of God's love than we have right now. At almost every turn in his teachings and in his behavior, Jesus challenged the religious and political authorities of his time. And I wonder, will we allow him to continue doing that? What he offered them and what he offers us is a choice. How the world would look if God ran the show, and how the world will look if we stay in charge. This, as are most of teachings Jesus, is a really hard one to hear. We are so accustomed to being reasonable, doing the right thing. You know, the ego doesn't like surprises unless it arranges them. Or can stand back a safe distance and observe them. What I think the sneaky little parable says is that we have to be open to looking, searching in the places and to the people where we least expect to find our true identity. This is a journey we make in and out. We go in and out to find what we have rejected. And having done that, we go into the world to do the same. What Jesus said to the religious leaders, however you interpret it, is, I'm doing what you ought to be doing. You know, some people so personalize their understanding of the teachings of Jesus that these teachings have no present tense applicability to the collective or political reality, whatever. They may be devoted to Jesus, they may pray to him, even refer to Jesus as my personal Savior. But they don't connect this devotion to political matters. They find it difficult to believe that our country is in any way like the imperial power that Jesus is challenging or which executed him. We idealize the notion of equality and justice for all to the point that we can fail to see that in our system of government, rights and privileges work well for those who have the power and money to make the system work. Which is why a young African-American male can get 7 to 10 year prison sentence for possession of controlled substance, and a financial boss can defraud billions and get away with an easily affordable fine and a slap on the wrist. Now, people who think of themselves as liberals can easily distort in the other direction. The teachings of Jesus can be equally misunderstood if they are interpreted only to have a political or social meaning. There's a dangerous distortion when either position gets the upper hand. To follow Jesus is to follow him personally, politically, and socially. You know, the people we now look back on and admire so much for what they did politically and socially, I have 3 people in mind. I could name more. Martin Niemöller would be one. I'm thinking about Dietrich Bonhoeffer, the German pastor, who got involved in a plot to assassinate Hitler, and for that he was hung. I'm talking about Desmond Tutu, who endured horrors in South Africa fighting apartheid with such courage. I'm talking about Martin Luther King Jr., who kept on keeping on despite all the threats he faced. None of these people could have done what they did without a deep centering in God, like that which Jesus had, which led him to be executed. What the parable of the shepherd who finds the lost sheep calls for us, whether we play the part of the shepherd or allow ourselves to be in the role of the sheep, It's about where we place our loyalty, what matters to us. In a culture where the civil religion is consumerism, and where there are many false gods calling for us to worship at their shrine, Jesus keeps calling us back to be loyal to God. God cares about what? God has a passion for compassion, justice, and nonviolence at all levels, both personally and politically. You know, one of the reasons that I keep harping on having a daily practice is that we will not step into non-duality without it. You can't do it. I'm convinced. You just can't do it. I mentioned to you last week, but it was not in my notes last week, it is today, that the wonderful St. Paul's Choir offered an offertory piece of music that included some words you're going to see. And forgive the sexist language, the poor author didn't know any better. I sought the Lord, and afterward I knew. He moved my soul to seek him, seeking me. It was not I that found, O Savior true. No, I was found by thee. I think one indication that lets us know we're on the right track, whatever religion you choose to practice, is when we see through the illusion of the seeker and the fantasy of the search. And we let go of both of those, again, giving you nothing to hold on to. But when we move into the position where seeking becomes seeing and seeing becomes seeking, they're the same. When we do this, kindness, compassion, generosity, justice, they're going to take care of themselves. We will spontaneously wish for and work toward all beings free from suffering, that all people live in peace, and we will begin genuinely to care about each other. God, our planet needs this. So I'm found a piece of music I want to play for you. Everybody's anxiety goes up. Oh my God, he's going to sing. I got this piece from Jim Finley, and so it's now mine and my words, but it got my attention because he begins with an allusion to a magician. And it got me. So this is Finley and Kerley, so it's mashed up here together. So a magician fans out a deck face down on the table and says, go ahead, pick a card, any card, doesn't matter. Doesn't matter which card you choose. Then you bury it face down back into the deck. The magician picks the deck up and inexplicably produces the card from behind your ear. Now imagine, you're out walking on the beach and God says, go ahead, pick up a grain of sand, any grain of sand. No matter what grain of sand you choose. God is present in it. It's the nature of God to be completely present in everything. Further, since the whole universe flows from God, is sustained by God, and subsists in God, you are holding in your hand a grain of sand in which you, along with the whole universe and everyone and everything in it, is wholly present. But God goes on. In this game of spiritual legerdemain, God says, go ahead, pick a place, a situation in which you might find yourself. And suppose you pick a wooded area surrounded by trees, and God says, go ahead, pick a leaf, any leaf. And you do. And you realize you're holding a leaf in which the totality of reality is wholly present. Go somewhere else. Choose something else. Doesn't matter. You realize you're choosing something in which God is wholly present, loving you and all people and all things into being. And then God goes further and says, pick some aspect of your own being. No matter what you focus on, God is there, wholly present in each breath, each thought, each feeling. When you lie down, when you sit, when you arise, God is present as the ungraspable immediacy of whatever you do. God is, as you laugh, God is there in your laughter. As you cry, God is there, wholly present in each tear that falls from your eye. We want to provide the least resistance possible to whatever it takes to awaken us from the illusion, and it can be nightmarish, that we are separate from God. May we wake up from the illusion of separateness that perpetuates our fears because we believe we are separate from each other or from others. And may we contribute to the awakening of all others. May we move from reason to wonder, experience the oneness of seeking and being sought. Further, may we be people in whose presence others are able to see God's presence in their lives, so that they too might know the freedom that comes from knowing that not only are we safe in God, we are one in God as well. May we grow in our courage, understanding, and determination to live this sacred identity that we are. No matter where you go this week, no matter what happens, you carry a precious cargo, so watch your step, and I'll see you here next week. Thank you.